Og jeg vil tilbake til Nancy Pelosi. Jeg vil se det klippet med Nancy Pelosi nå.
Where were you, Nancy Pelosi, by the way, and Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in 2018? Did you forget already? Remember, there was a breach then, too. Anti-Kavanaugh agitators right there, marching right past Capitol Police and occupying the Senate Hart Building. How soon we forget. Where were top Democrats last summer when Minneapolis was burning during a massive riot? Well, that's right. Senator Harris was promoting a bail fund on Twitter. Why? To get violent rioters and arsonists out of jail. And, of course, supporting the defund the police effort in L.A. Remember that Chaz, Chop, autonomous, summer of love, spaghetti potluck dinner zone in Seattle? Where were the Democrats then promoting the lawless zone as a wonderful democratic experiment? That is until 2 young African-American teens were murdered. And you might remember Horace Lorenzo Anderson Sr. talking about his son. He's on this program for an hour. At that point, Seattle's mayor, Jenny Durkin, had not even bothered to pick up a telephone and call him. She was the genius that referred to the autonomous Chaz Chop zone as the summer of love zone. And who could forget the nightly riots? Went on forever, it seemed, in Portland and downtown. Far-left agitators trying to burn a federal courthouse to the ground every night for months. Democrats were literally absolutely out of their mind, and not the rioters, but the president. Well, first they were mad at him. How's that? For sending federal security forces to protect the courthouse. And also we saw arson and vandalism and looting in St. Louis, in Chicago, in Los Angeles, New York, Kenosha, Wisconsin. This was fiery but a peaceful protest, according to fake news CNN. Why he's calling it a peaceful protest? Look over his shoulders, both shoulders. Does that look peaceful to you? Washington, D.C., violent left-wing rioters, they tried to breach the White House. Many Secret Service agents were wounded. President Trump was forced to evacuate. Nearby St. John's Church, remember that, was lit ablaze. Schumer, Pelosi, they didn't care. Guess what? The media mob, they didn't seem to care much either. If you remember, they were still, as usual, predictably feigning outrage and anger and rage at Donald Trump and the Trump administration for pushing so-called demonstrators back a few blocks. And according to The Guardian, this summer's carnage killed at least 25 Americans. 25. Joe Biden, he refused to condemn the violence for months until it started hurting him in the polls. He wasn't alone. Over and over again, many on the left, they ignored or made excuses for the violent riots across the country. And we have the tape to prove it. Take a look.
Respectfully, shouldn't that be done by a commission or the city council, not a mob in the middle of the night throwing it into the harbor?
People will do what they do.
There's violence across the whole country. Do you disavow the violence from Antifa? That's happening in Portland right now? There's riots.
That's a myth that's being spread only in Washington, D.C.
About Antifa in Portland?
Yes.
They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And that should be, everyone should take note of that on both levels, that this isn't, they're not going to let up, and they should not.
This is mostly a protest. It is not, generally speaking, unruly, but fires have been started.
Perhaps this is some sort of mechanism for a restructure in our country.
Okay, what did they just say? Make matters worse, you had some actually praising Antifa or Antifa, whatever you prefer. That's the radical group whose anarchist members were hell-bent on fomenting violence. We can remind you of that also. Take a look.
What are they really? I know their name is anti-fascist. Do they only go after fascists, or do they go after anybody, say, in the global economic community they don't like?
No, they are strictly principled anti-fascists. And what they see in the Trump administration and what they see happening in this country, they see the neo-fascism that we see.
A lot of people recognize that when pushed, self-defense is a legitimate response to white supremacist and neo-Nazi violence.
It says it right in the name, Antifa, anti-fascism, which is what they were there fighting. Listen, there's, no organization is perfect. There was some violence.
No organization's perfect. There's some violence. Huh? Sadly, Democrats, the mob, the media, they weren't just defending Antifa and ignoring the carnage. Instead, many prominent Democrats, They were on the front lines, actually glorifying violence against the president and his supporters. How quickly they all forget. One thing I can promise people over the next number of years, I have a really good memory. I'm not going to forget, and I'll often remind you, in case you forget. Take a look.
Yes, I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
How dare he say the things he does? Of course I want to punch him in the face.
Right. You know, there needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
You see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd.
When they go low, we kick them.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be.
I'll put Mr. Burgess up against Sean Hannity. He'll tear him up.
The press always asks me, don't I wish I were debating him? No, I wish we were in high school. I could take him behind the gym. That's what I wish.
Just stop for a moment. Think about this. Can you imagine if any prominent conservative ever said any one of those things, let's say this week or today? What would the reaction be by the very same people? Yesterday, fake news, fake Jake Tapper tweeted, quote, "It wasn't today's events that distinguished bad people from good people. That moment is long past." I guess you're right, Jake, but not in the way you think. Now, perhaps some self-reflection on your network's 5 years of lying, hysteria, conspiracy theories, slanders, smears might do you some good.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by storming the Capitol.
Extraordinary moment. I don't know what else to say. Anti-Kavanaugh chanting, and then, Ronnie, let's turn around and look at the door here. And then this moment, just as they did at the Capitol, rushing to the top of the steps of the Supreme Court, and now besieging the front door of the Supreme Court.
Sorry, wrong video.
If you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome.
Wrong video again. Sorry.
I want to be clear in how I characterize this. This is mostly a protest. It is not generally speaking unruly, but fires have been started.
Ain't alive, I'm having a bad day.
Please, show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
Actually, I changed my mind. Those are the right videos. Apparently, when you lock people in their homes, take away their jobs, tell them they can't go to church, applaud while race baiters cause $1 billion in damage rioting all summer, then tell those same people they're crazy for believing the election, their only nonviolent recourse for pushing back against the madness, wasn't 100% on the up and up, this happens. Apparent pro-Trump protesters gathered in Washington, D.C. yesterday for a rally as a joint session of Congress met to count the Electoral College delegates and all but seal Joe Biden's win from November. As President Trump was speaking at the aforementioned rally, a group of protesters broke off from the main event after they heard Vice President Mike Pence was not going to be engaging in any sort of protest. In the hours that followed, the group of protesters turned violent, breaking into the U.S. Capitol building, smashing glass windows, and making their way into the House chambers. Other rioters were able to make their way into congressional offices, including those of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. One woman was shot by Capitol security, a married San Diego woman named Ashley Babbitt, who was a 35-year-old U.S. Air Force veteran. In all, 4 people died amidst the chaos at the Capitol yesterday, including Babbitt. The joint session temporarily concluded before the House resumed activities last night. And that's what happened while we were away.
Og de har demokratene altså forfulgt Trump I 4 år for å få noe I Russland eller Ukraina på han, og til og med stilt han for riksrett. Og så det altså Biden som har holdt på med dette her. Og dette noe av
kjernen.
Ja, altså dette noe av irrasjonaliteten I politikken på demokratisk side som skremmende, fordi det går ikke an å nå frem og fortelle folk
Slik sett så det ikke bare på demokratenes side, vil jeg si, Hans, fordi at jeg tror at det står ikke så veldig mye bedre til I andre demokratier heller. Jeg tror altså at det flere land som kunne hatt behov for en kraftig utluftning og revisjon av skjulte nettverk og skjulte forbindelser.
Ja da. Vi ser jo trekk og tegn I vårt samfunn også som peker I retning av det du beskriver der, så da kan vi jo snakke om at det en demokratiets krise.
Ja.